It's Wednesday, the 2nd of March, 2016. I'm Robin Yellow, and this is Techtasm. Google crashed my car! And with me is James Woodall.
Mr. Yellow, how you doing?
Oh, very good. Yes, very good. Welcome to the show. This week we're going to be looking at the Cat S60 rugged phone with built-in infrared camera. We're going to take a look at the Xiaomi Redmi 3 phone. We're going to tell you a little bit about Microsoft buying Xamarin, and Google this week had a bit of an accident. Now, every week we look at each story and try to make a determination to see which one's real or which one's a Techtasm. And our definition of a Techtasm is a portmanteau of tech for technology, a machine, a piece of equipment, method, etc. And tasm, short for phantasm, something that exists only in a person's mind. So, on with the show. Doug Bolton in The Independent reported this week, the Cat S60 is the world's first smartphone with, wait for it James, a built-in thermal imaging camera.
Because everybody needs one of those.
They do. Now, Caterpillar is a company that you all know. It's known for its heavy machinery. They're very yellow, one of my favourite colours. But they unveiled at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona last month this S60 camera, S60 mobile phone with a thermal imaging camera from manufacturer FLIR. That's F-L-I-R, FLIR. Now, they're well known in the industrial sector for making these thermal cameras. And the phone itself, I mean, it looks slightly thicker than a regular phone. Obviously, it's been designed for some level of intrinsic safety, that it can be dropped without breaking, so it's ruggedized, and it's got IP67 for moisture and dust intrusion. And it's got a 13 megapixel camera. It's got the usual Snapdragon. It's a 617, so it's maybe not so fast. 3 gigs of RAM, 3800 milliamp hour battery, so it's going to last a whole day, and it's going to cost about $600 now, $600 US. So it's quite cheap for a ruggedized camera, actually, given that it's probably intended for an industrial sector. But James, what on earth do you need a thermal camera for?
I honestly, I do not know. I'm amazed that a company like this has found the market share, or done the market research to know that they can shift enough units to make this commercially sane. I mean, on one hand, I'll be honest, $600 US for a rugged device is that's really competitive by itself without the camera.
Well, one of the use cases they show actually on the article in The Independent is a picture of a door, which obviously is showing all the thermal leaks, the places where the heat is bleeding out. And there's a kind of crosshair that obviously you tap, and it shows you the temperature of that exact pixel or that point on the image. Couldn't this be used in a sort of home eco context for looking for where to put your draft excluder?
I can definitely see the use case of the thermal imaging camera 100%. What I'm struggling with is, how could it possibly make commercial sense to build it into a device? Because FLIR make add-on cameras for existing smartphones. Surely that's a more sensible use of the hardware. I mean, how often are you going to need a thermal camera? Sure, these use cases are great, but
I think day to day the use case isn't there. In an industrial context, it probably is. But again, maybe FLIR wanted to do this a bit on the cheap to kind of get their brand out there. Now, that's a brand that's known in the industrial context very well. But outside of that, you and I buying our Cat rugged phone. Again, Cat, that's another thing. You see, well, you're buying effectively a phone with a Digger brand on the back. That's about brand recognition. Maybe it goes to the heart of the rugged. It's something you got in a pub. Check this out. Look at the barmaid through the thermal camera. I don't know, $600. I'd keep your money. What are you going to call it, James?
It's definitely a Techtasm. It's got Techtasm written all over it.
It's a total Techtasm, isn't it? So that's 2 for naught. Sorry, Cat. Try again next year.
So Ron Amadio in Ars Technica this week is reviewing, which of course is something these guys do all the time, but a Xiaomi Redmi 3 mobile phone. Now, what's special about this is Xiaomi aren't really known in the Western marketplace because generally speaking they're a budget Chinese manufacturer.
Are they budget? I'm sorry to talk so quick there, James, but I'm not sure they are budget, are they?
Well, it's £100.
No, budget in the West, but in the Chinese market, they're known as a premium brand, premium feel, metal cases. In fact, the CEO of Xiaomi often dresses like Steve Jobs, and does effectively a copy of Steve Jobs's Apple presentation. So I don't know. They've got a budget price for sure.
Yeah, they absolutely have a budget price, and they must be not necessarily cutting corners, but doing some pretty crazy things on their BOM cost to get that right down. I guess what I'm interested in is
what's a BOM?
The bill of materials. It's I guess the sum of all the raw components just in the device itself, and certainly whenever new iPhones come out, people like to break those down and work out how much does an iPhone actually cost in terms of the materials. But hey, £100 for the components alone in a device like this is really, really impressive. So
what are the specs on it?
It's pretty high end. I mean, it's high end for us to be reviewing it. I mean, again, it is running Android 5.1 Lollipop, but it's got a 1.5 gigahertz Snapdragon processor, which of course is quad core, 2 gig of RAM, and 16 gig card with expandable up to 128. Usual suspects on the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, 4G support, micro USB, pretty decent camera at 13 megapixels. It's got a
big battery actually at 4100 milliamp hours.
I mean, it's a pretty high-end spec device, and I guess I'm amazed that they've managed to do that. But will those devices, really ever make it big? Where we are in the UK, in the States, and
Well, can I draw your attention to one bit of Ron Amadio's excellent Ars Technica article? The catch with this device, like all Xiaomi devices, is that you can't buy it in US or Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't support the right LTE. Well, I can live with 3G, can I? Well, I don't know. But you have to import it from the US. That means you've got to go to a Chinese site, pick English, pick your export destination. The price in yuan, renminbi, is converted to GB pounds or in fact US dollars, and you get an import. Now, that means you also get presumably stuck with the version of Android that they're running. I'm not sure. That's going to be AOSP, isn't it? Not stock Android from Google.
I would. On the screenshot they've got the Play Store, so I think
that's true. Yeah,
probably is full. But of course, it's their own flavor of Android, and as we all know, with various Android manufacturers, that your mileage may vary depending on how much effort your manufacturer wants to put in, and in some cases, they're better off just giving you stock.
Well, I noticed that actually on the picture that's shown in the article, it doesn't have an app tray, so that's missing. So they've clearly interfered with Android quite a lot. And also they've got that kind of square with round corners thing going on.
It's very Apple-esque.
It's totally Apple clone, isn't it? Now, far be it from me to cast aspersions on Xiaomi, but China has got a long and illustrious record in copying or mimicking other people's designs.
Yeah.
Now, while this, as I said, is a desirable phone to have in the Chinese market, you could call it the poor man's iPhone, I don't know. Clearly, they've taken a few cues from Apple in a market where they're not going to be sued to death by Apple, where, of course, Samsung, that boldly sells phones in North America, ended up losing an enormous suit to Apple a few years ago, and I think they're still paying it off, or they're still arguing about how to pay it off.
They're still arguing about it. I mean, every so often you see another ruling that says that one's one and then the other one's one. I'll be surprised if money ever changes hands in that particular one.
Would you carry one of these phones around?
A Xiaomi phone, I'm an iOS user, and as we've discussed previously on Techtasm, when you buy into a platform, you're kind of there for life, really.
Oh no! You mean you're beyond saving?
This is a conversation that we are going to have eternally for many, many years.
I will tempt you to the light side. Oh no, is it the other way around? Who knows?
It depends if you have cookies or not. I think I won't have it, because the idea of it being, as you say, a poor man's iPhone, I will use it and think, oh, it's missing this, it's missing that. You know, if you inevitably with these kind of devices, when you scratch the surface, are you going to shudder at what you find? It's very easy to have a nice press photo with the front screen, but you know what's peeking and lurking beneath the shadows.
I'm calling this one a Techtasm. I don't think they're going to sell in Europe or the US because I think they're afraid of being sued, like Samsung were. I don't think they're bold enough to sell into the markets that are regulated where copyright is enforced. I think it's a total Techtasm. I don't think we're going to see Xiaomi anytime soon.
I agree. I think, however, there's a chance that perhaps as Xiaomi as a brand or other companies like it perhaps get more established, and the fact they're being reviewed in places like Ars Technica are showing that's starting to happen, that Techtasm, which I agree with, may change to Ariel at some point in the future.
Saad Chandna in Business, etc., yes, you heard that right, Business, etc., reported this week that the software giant Microsoft has completed its acquisition of Xamarin. Now, if you're into programming, you'll know that Xamarin is one of those projects or a company, or is a company based originally, I think, on Mono, that took .NET, which is Microsoft's programming architecture, and James is going to clear this all up in a minute, don't worry, and made it open source, which meant that actually you could compile it on different platforms, not just Microsoft. And it's found a really good lease of life as a mobile operating system, particularly for Android and iOS. Now, what you can do with this is you can write your mobile app using Xamarin in .NET, and then compile it natively for each platform, which means that you get most of the code that you write, A, runs native, and B, can be reused across the two environments. Did I get that right, James?
Yeah, you did. Xamarin's fantastic. I use it every day. It's a great move for Microsoft, and it's very interesting that when Visual Studio 2015, which is Microsoft's programming environment, was released probably 6 months ago now, maybe a little bit longer, it included Xamarin support natively. So it's an obvious acquisition. It makes a lot of sense. Ironically, the Windows Phone portion of Xamarin is perhaps its weakest offering.
Really? So, the Windows Phone is the weakest part of it?
Of Xamarin, yes.
Maybe do you think Microsoft bought it to strengthen that bit up, to make Windows Mobile more relevant?
I think it's possibly, that might be nice. However, I think in reality, what it does is it means that it gives Microsoft more control over the development of other platforms. Because Microsoft, at its core, is a development company. We all think back to Steve Ballmer breaking his voice box, shouting, developers, developers, developers.
He actually damaged his voice, didn't he?
He did. He had to have surgery.
I love this company. Oh, I tell you, I miss him in his mad antics.
Yes, definitely. And I think Microsoft have possibly accepted that Windows Phone might not be long for this world. And by getting hold of Xamarin, which is doing very well in the space, it really gives Microsoft a new lease of life with other platforms.
Well, they'd already raised $82 million in funding from
incredible.
Floodgate, Charles River Ventures, Inside Venture Partners, Lead Edge Capital. So, clearly it was one of those companies that was getting the interest of the venture capitals, and with presumably some kind of exit strategy to sell to one of the larger companies, Microsoft being the blindingly obvious one.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about these tools, and there are quite a few about them, we can think of Apache Cordova as well, which provides a similar offering. I personally love the Xamarin platform because, as you mentioned in the opening there, it gives you the native experience on the device.
And that means fast, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Now, the purists will argue that when you're running on any kind of interpreted style of runtime engine, you're going to get some performance loss. And you're absolutely right. They say it's about 80%. But that only affects you if you're doing some serious number crunching, which
80% performance loss?
No, 80% of the performance, so a 20% performance loss.
Right.
So, but that only affects you if you're doing some serious number crunching. And as most developers know, the majority of the time you're waiting for your application is when it's doing any kind of I/O. Any like network communication or disk communication and so forth. So anything lost in the processing time, no user will ever notice with the naked eye.
What on earth are Microsoft doing? They seem to everything better news I read about Microsoft is all about iOS and Android.
Well, they're going where the people are, right? I mean, iOS plus Android equals 90+% of the mobile marketplace. I mean, all you've got left, probably in that last 5%, are BlackBerry and Windows. So, hey, and Microsoft have already got Windows tied up, right? So all that's left is BlackBerry.
Do it's funny? They made all this big thing about Windows 10 running on everywhere from a gigantic wall-mounted interactive collaboration thingy through an Xbox and a laptop and a tablet and a phone, top to bottom. And in fact, I'll tell you, one of my picks for Mobile World Congress was the HP, I think it's the HP X3, which was a Windows 10 phone, which came with a little dock, which turned it into a desktop. Very interesting and innovative in that space, yet they just don't seem to be getting the traction. As you say, maybe the war is over.
I think it possibly is. And what's really interesting about Xamarin on the universal Windows platform front, which is everything from phones to desktops and tablets, etc., is the Xamarin user interface layer also supports writing for those types of devices as well. So if you write a Xamarin user interface, not only will it run on iOS and Android, it will also run on Windows Phone and tablet and the larger platforms as well. And there's even some effort going into Mac native applications as well. So this is a really smart move for Microsoft. If they can roll up Xamarin into their own platform offering and make Xamarin more of a Microsoft product, because Microsoft look after their developers really, really well. I think that this has got the chance for Microsoft to really get embedded in all different walks of life, regardless of whether it's a Microsoft-owned platform or not. This gets them everywhere. So I guess the question really is, and perhaps I've already answered the question, will this acquisition really help Microsoft embed themselves further into our development lives?
It's it's got to be.
It's definitely a real, absolutely.
Will self-driving cars crash into each other or crash into you? Well, this week, Megan Gauss reported again in Ars Technica about Google's self-driving car striking a bus in California. Now, as you can imagine, the popular press got very excited at the prospect of one of Google's robot cars crashing headlong into another vehicle. What actually happened was that this autonomous car was indicating left to pull into the first lane and coming up on the inside lane at about 15 miles an hour as a bus. Now, the human driver in there that's monitoring what the car is doing saw the bus coming up on the inside, knew that the car was indicating and moving to go left, and obviously the algorithm had predicted that the bus would not come charging up the inside, even if it was only at 15 miles an hour. But the bus kept going. Obviously felt it had some kind of right of way in that situation. It scraped up the side of the Google car on the sort of front near side, which obviously did quite a lot of damage to the Google car. Didn't do much damage to the bus. But James, it was inevitable this was going to happen, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And before this incident, Google were very, very proud, and rightly so, of the millions of miles of driving.
Is it millions?
It is millions of miles. It's it's a great, great achievement. And for this to happen, I mean, crikey, we've been doing self-driving cars for a couple of years now. For this to be the first time is impressive in itself. But I think what it does is it brings a reality check to this type of situation, whereby algorithms are great. Human behavior is...
Who's liable?
Who's liable?
Who does the bus company go after for damages?
Well, I think Google is the obvious target because they're big and, you know...
Well, it's their vehicle and their software. Question is, if they put their software into an Audi or a BMW or some other car, somebody else licenses them, then who's on the hook?
Oh, that's a really, really interesting question, and it's definitely one for the lawyers to answer when that inevitably happens. I think what you'll probably find is perhaps, because of course in the licensing agreements between Google and whoever it is that they're licensed to, these kind of things will have to be spelled out, perhaps not for public consumption. I would expect there to be joint liability from a contract basis.
And you're not a lawyer, though?
No, absolutely. Far from it.
Far from it. Well, we're not going to answer that one quickly. I think, are you going to call it real or Techtasm? I think it's inevitable that these self-driving cars are going to crash into each other.
Yes.
But do you think, and I'm going to ask you to call this one, whether you think this is going to happen or whether you think this is just an ironic hope. Do you think it's going to be safer for autonomous vehicles to crash into each other than when humans do it? Because certainly in North America alone, something like, and I might have got this wrong, so I'm sorry, I don't have the facts in front of me, but something like 1,800 people are killed every day by vehicles in North America. That could be all of America, to be honest, but a frightening number of people die in accidents. Are autonomous vehicles going to make it safer for humans or not?
An autonomous vehicle crashing into an autonomous vehicle absolutely will be safer, because you'd like to think the two of them will at least try and coordinate with each other.
That's a good point. Now, of course, computers on board autonomous cars can communicate to each other, whereas we can't. Humans are not very good at it in a crisis situation.
However, an autonomous vehicle crashing into a human, all bets are off. I have no idea. I probably wouldn't trust it. Possibly because, for example, like in this case, the car didn't do what you'd like it to do. And even though there was a person controlling it, that person didn't expect what happened to happen either.
The human thought, if the human was driving, he said that he would probably do the same thing. That it was, the way he said it, and obviously the data should be able to support this as well, was that the bus was at fault or didn't see the indication or didn't see the movement of the car, and in fact that it was human error. But obviously they can't say that, but that's how I read it. Yes.
I think self-driving cars are going to be as safe as normal vehicles are today until the whole world is full of self-driving cars.
Well, let's call this an opinion piece, because I'm not sure there is a Techtasm in here. It was just something we're both really interested in.
Yes.
Well, that's about it for this week. Now, as always, you can find us at facebook.com/Techtasm. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher or Feedburner, and you can contact us at feedback@techtasm.com. We would ask, if you are on iTunes, to give us as many stars as you possibly can. It really helps to promote the show. We record every Tuesday normally. We did Wednesday this week, but Tuesday normally at 2100 BST GMT, so watch out for next week's episode. This is me, Robin Yellow.
And me, James Woodall.
Saying, is it real or is it a Techtasm?